Hello everyone, I hope you're fine, that you're still following the work that we're doing on Native Americans. So here is the correction about the history of Native Americans. So the worksheet you had to do, it was quite a long work, I admit. So here is going to be maybe a long correction too. So just to start with, you must know that Native Americans represent less than 1% of the total population in the US, and that you have more than 500 tribes, more than 5 different tribes in the US. So you might know the Cherokee, the Sioux, the Crow, the Blackfeet are one of the most famous names of Native American tribes. So, in terms of the history, so it's really important to understand the history of Native Americans in the US. This history is a bit the same in Canada, for example. And to better understand the present and to better understand why they still need to fight, or if they still need to fight. So first, so here's the correction of the different dates that you had to look for. So please take your document and take a highlighter, because we're going to highlight the keywords so that we can answer the next question about the relationship between the Native American and the colonizers. So first, so the Treaty of Paris. So the Treaty of Paris is quite important because it symbolizes both the end of the period, that is the American Revolution, and at the same time the beginning of another period with the conflicts between the colonizer and the indigenous people. So here it's so in this relationship, it's also the beginning of the appropriation of the land and the process of assimilation of the Native Americans. So here it's this idea that the US claims that the Americans, all the Native American lands, are the American lands because they have conquered the US and they have the right to possess this land. Now, 1830, the Indian Removal Act. So I made a mistake. So the Indian Removal Act is this idea of the creation of the reservation. So here the US forced the Native Americans to move away from their hereditary land, from their historical lands and native lands, and they have to move onto reservations. So this is the key word. Which were protected by the United States. So they have to move away from their historical land to new lands which were smaller than the original land. So the second step in this process of assimilation. So now the next step is the Indian Appropriation Act. It means that here the US government no longer push the Native Americans away from their hereditary land, but now they also claim that these lands, the Native Americans' lands, are the government's land. So they no longer belong to the Native Americans, but they belong to the federal state. Now, the next step, the Dawes Act. So the Native Americans have moved to reservation, to a new territory. In the traditional way of living of Native American, the land belongs to everyone and belongs to the community. it's something that they share together. So here the federal government, again, the federal government forces the Native American to divide their land into individual plots. So this idea of partitioning, of dividing the land into individual plots that belongs to a family, to a family. So this is not what the Native Americans were used to, and it's more a reference and a practice that is done by Western civilization and this idea of individual propriety. So this is part of the policy of assimilation, one of the steps, and this process of assimilation aims to annihilate the culture of the Native American and the traditions of the Native Americans, to make this culture disappear from the US. Okay, so I hope you understood. So now, one of the most famous battle between the US forces and a Native American tribe. So this battle is quite emblematic because it was a real massacre, and they slaughtered women and not only men but women and children. This relationship between the federal government and the Native Americans was extremely tense, and it culminated in this massacre, which was the sign of the end of the resistance of Native American, and so the beginning or the climax of the expansion of the white people onto the land of the Native Americans, so total freedom to do whatever they wanted to do. So 1924, so we'll see that there are different steps in the history of Native Americans. So here is a new period. So it corresponds to the period where Native Americans fought for their rights. So they first got the citizenship because they lived in this territory, which was theirs before the US was born, and they were not considered as citizens of the United States. So they were given the citizenship after the First World War, but you're going to see that they are given rights, but there are always some restrictions, some conditions that limits and restricts the rights that they are given. And here they are American citizens, but they don't have the right to vote, which is one of the most basic rights of citizenship. So here, a form of contradiction. You give something, but at the same time you hold something. Then more rights. So here in 1968, they got the right to vote. Yet another restriction: the federal state can intervene in tribal conflicts. So it means that the tribes are not independent; they are not autonomous. And there is the federal state can intervene to stop a conflict within the tribe or between two tribes. So it means that they are not considered as people who can take decision and who can manage their own lives. So it's quite important because it reflects how the United States saw the Native Americans. 1978. So now they finally got the right to practice their own religion, which was forbidden so far. So this is the end of the second period, and now we can move to a new period, or we can move to what is happening today, and it's so this protest is quite emblematic because it's a grassroots movement. It means that it's a movement which was launched by the Native American themselves, so from not just by the chief of the tribe, but by the people of the community of the tribe. And they tried to make their protest visible, to make their voice heard, to fight against new threats which are done against their community and against the Native Americans. So and threats which are threatening their tradition, their culture, their lifestyle again, right? So it's quite symbolic because it seems that the past is coming back, and that the fight is still necessary for Native American. So I just want to go back to have a global vision about this. So in the 8 dates that I have given you, so obviously it's a summary, but in the 8 dates you can notice 3 periods. So so please take notes. I hope you were taking notes before. So the first period is from 1783 to 1924. And so this is, as we said, the process of forced assimilation. So you've got the keywords here of forced assimilation. It means that the heritage, the cultural heritage of the Native American was progressively absorbed by the dominant culture, the culture of the colonizers, and it was absorbed into the mainstream culture. So assimilation is the extreme form of acculturation. So this idea that the indigenous people are forced to take the culture, the language, the lifestyle of the people who colonized them. Right? And so obviously in this period, if we use some keywords to describe the relationship between Native American and the white majority or the federal government, so we can say that it's a relationship between a colonizer and a colonized. So we've got this idea of superiority and inferiority, this idea of hierarchy, of the strong versus the weak. And if you have an unbalanced relationship between two sides, it obviously triggers tension, it obviously triggers conflict, war, and so if there is war, there is obviously violence. Violence leads to pain and to suffering, and it also leads to a form of feelings which is resentment, this idea that Native American will never forget what happened at this period, and that this period is obviously haunting the present. So you can really understand the link between past and present, and how the past is still visible and still felt in the present situation of the Native Americans. Moreover, so if you have this relationship which is unbalanced, you will obviously have a sense of injustice, and that's what the Native American still feel today, because at this period, since they were not considered as citizens, they were subjected to some laws that they didn't write, that they didn't agree with. They had to be subjected to